stars. And that transitions sort of into the defensive line as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
The defensive line is going to be a strength of this football team, in my opinion. The question is how big of a strength will it be? And that kind of we can get into, we've talked about before, and that's not like a concern. But I think when I look at this football team, I'm as confident in this side of the ball, like this unit, as I am probably on the team in regard to just there's high low. What makes a unit great? Do you have stars? Yes, they do. Do you have depth at all positions? Yes, they do. Do you have a rotation where when you put your second wave in or mix and match your ones and twos, because that's what will happen, right? Like early last year, they were just sending in like the entire second team. And I was like, well, you look at a lot of the big plays that happened last year. So when they had the whole second team defensive line out there, it was a mistake by the defensive staff last year. And they eventually went away from that and went back to what I think works, which is after the first series or two, you kind of mix and match. You have your number 2 nose with your number 1 3 tech and your number 1 big end with your number 2 Viper, whatever the case may be. Or, maybe your number 1 3 and Viper with your number 2 nose and big end, since they tend to be on the same side together. And so to me, when I look at this group, that's the big thing for me is to say, hey, this group has got all the things that you look for. And that doesn't even include if a Gabriel Rubio or a Jason Onye or, Aiden Gobira or Tyson Ford or Josh Burnham step up. They don't even need that to happen for them to already be in that position. If those guys step up, it only adds to what I think is the unit. I think the 2 lines are the sides of the ball that right now I view as being the best of what Notre Dame has to offer. I'm more confident of them than I am of really any position group on this team.
It's so nice when you have a guy like Isaiah Foskey, because to your point, where all the protection is going to be slid early in the year, right? Like, who is going to be the guy every game, or at least early in the year, that they're going to say, we can't let number 7 stop us. Like, it's not going to happen, right? So, I mean, I got to think that guys like Jason Adamalola and Riley Mills, to your point, Brian, Justin Adamalola, all of them are just kind of chomping at the bit saying, wow, that guy is going to provide us so many one-on-one opportunities. And it is hard for me to imagine that there is a world where a Riley Mills, where a Justin Adamalola, where a Jason Adamalola, where a Howard Cross or a Jacob Lacey, whoever, Aiden Gobira, if he gets some playing time, are going to get consistent one-on-one matchups and be able to be stopped. I just can't see a world where that is going to happen. So I think there could be a big shift, especially early on in the year too, where Isaiah Foskey is your dude. Like, he is absolutely the guy. And that going into the game, everyone is going to say 7's not going to beat us. So therefore, Riley Mills might have a day, to your point. Jason Adamalola might have a day, to your point. Justin Adamalola may have a day, to your point. All these guys could have days. I am just trying to see if they are consistent enough across the board from a nose, 3 tech, big end perspective, where eventually you can take some of the pressure off Isaiah Foskey and say, wow, now Isaiah is getting some one-on-ones because Riley Mills just had 3 sacks last game or 2 sacks last game, or Jason Adamalola lived in the backfield all day. So we need to, kind of mix up our protection a little bit to make sure that 57 is going to beat us, right? So I agree with you, Brian. I think that right now, this defensive line, how could you not be excited about the prospects of playing with Isaiah? And I don't want that to go the opposite direction of saying like it's Isaiah and a bunch of guys, because there is a lot of talent on this defensive line. There really is. And if you give these guys some one-on-one opportunities, especially early on in the year, because you're going to see it against Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State is going to sit there and say, even though I'm sure they have a lot of confidence in Paris Johnson, I'm sure. And I'm sure they have confidence in DeJuan Jones. I'm sure they have confidence in their guys. I'm not saying they don't. But I think that they would be very silly if they weren't like, all right, let's slide our protection to 7 this time. Let's try to do that. And I think that you're going to see if the defensive line, aside from Isaiah Foskey, can be consistent all the way through the year, that's only going to make Isaiah better. And this position has a chance to be one of the better defensive lines in all of college football.
I think we saw a little bit of that last year. There were games like Jason Adamula coming out early against USC. USC kind of trying to focus its protection on Isaiah, and Jason comes out on like the first or second play of the game and just destroys the guy and gets a sack. We saw like the Virginia game last year when Myron went down. Riley Mills steps in and Nana steps in, and they both play really good. Nana against the run, Riley getting 2 sacks in the game. So for me, Ryan, I think that's kind of where you're right. That needs to happen. I think where I'm coming from is I'm confident it will. And I know you are too, but that's what they've got to show, right? Like, and I think it's even more true in the big games because as good as the D line was, I don't think it was great against Cincinnati last year because I don't think anybody really stepped up when they were taking Isaiah out and said, "Hey, I'm going to go make a play." They weren't bad. I mean, Cincinnati could not run on Notre Dame last year, and that's a big part of that's the D line played really well. What I'm more referring to is those big money stops, right? Where it's third down and you need to get to the quarterback. They're taking Isaiah out. Can you stop that? Can somebody else step up? That's what we're going to need to see. And it doesn't need to happen against Cal or Marshall or BYU or North Carolina or Stanford or Syracuse or BC or Navy. It needs to happen against Clemson. It needs to happen against Ohio State. It needs to happen against USC and in the postseason. To me, those are going to be the big keys when I look at just how good this D-line is going to be. But it's going to be a strength. Of that, we have no doubt. The question is how much of a strength, and when that's your discussion, your baseline is really good, and I think that's the positive about this team. That's about this unit going into the season. And here's the other part: one of the strengths we're going to talk about, which is going to be kind of interesting because it's not proven. Like the D line is proven. There's a lot of dudes coming back that have made big plays in big games. I mean, Jacob Lacey against Wisconsin on 4th and 1 last year, right? He's been a key rotation player for 3 years. Howard Cross was a key part of a really good D-line last year. Foskey, Riley Mills played a lot of snaps last year. We know the Adamiolas have been like 3-4 year parts of the defensive line rotation, right? Like there's a lot of guys there that have proven themselves to be good. There's way more proven production coming back along the D-line this year than there was last year when they were having to replace, Adetokunbo Ogundeji and Dalen Hayes. And then the year before that, they were replacing Khalid Kareem, Julian Aguar, and Jameer Jones. Mm-hmm. So they lost a lot the previous 2 years from that D-line. And this year, they lost Kurt Hinish and Myron Tagovailoa, who are great leaders, great guys, but they weren't like the impact difference makers like the guys they had lost in previous years were.
Sure.
And so they'll be easier to replace from a on-field standpoint. Now, will they be able to replace the leadership? That's the bigger question because those two guys were great leaders. So the point is I think that one thing that is going to really help this unit is one of the offensive strengths that for me, and we'll discuss this more, is the offensive line is going to be a strength for this team this year. They're going to be coached better. They're going to be big. They're going to be strong. They're going to be physical. This defensive line is going to be so much better prepared going into the season to handle what's going to come at them than they were last year. You could see it in the first couple games. It took the defensive line a couple games to really get going. Like Isaiah had some flashy plays. Jason had some flashy plays. Justin had some flashy plays. But there was a lot of undiscipline. There was a lot of just getting used to the block destruction. They were getting met a lot faster, I think, than they anticipated. So their get-offs had to improve. And that comes down to looking at it from you weren't prepared because you weren't going against somebody that tested you Monday to Friday and in fall camp. That's not going to be true this year. And I think that's going to make this unit even better. And we'll talk more about that down the road. But that's another reason why I'm confident in this group.